People think they missed it, but no, we're just starting. Like on a risk-adjusted return, it's still the best time ever right now. Everyone will want your Bitcoin. It's the most valuable resource on earth. We will start to see 100,000 candles in a week. And why do you need a Bitcoin? You don't need a whole Bitcoin. This house that I'm in right now costs 1,818 Bitcoin. But today it's worth 15. And I know in about 5 years it's going to be worth 2. We're done with 4-year cycles as far as the way we used to define them. The end game for Bitcoin is that it's...
What are the big things? I mean, obviously, we have the price all of a sudden, jumping up, moving 5%, 6% in the last, week or so. And, not coming out of nowhere, but just kind of starts, ripping. The government shuts down and all of a sudden Bitcoin starts taking off. Gold and silver obviously have been just absolutely ripping. We've talked about real estate a lot in the past, obviously, being a savings vehicle for people nowadays, because you can't put your cash in a bank account and get a return. So a lot of things going on, but what's the big thing just on your mind? I mean, obviously you guys run the spaces a ton, and what's the big, outside of maybe some of the Bitcoin infighting, which the average person might not know about that necessarily. What are some of the big things you guys have been watching and debating and talking about?
I think what we've lately been talking about has been the 4-year cycles, because typically in Bitcoin, even though there's only been 3 touch points, because Bitcoin is only 16 years old, we're about to hit another birthday, as any of your newer listeners know. On Halloween, Satoshi released the white paper, partially to sort of obfuscate who he is, and what a more perfect time than Halloween when we all wear masks. But I think the consensus is, at least my feeling is, that we're done with 4-year cycles as far as the way we used to define them. And, when Bitcoin started out, where the subsidy that miners released via the blocks they found was so high at 50 Bitcoin every single 10 minutes, every 24-hour period, there's 144 contests. And anyone who chooses to mine anywhere around the world can win that contest 144 times. And when it's 50 Bitcoin, that's pretty significant when it gets reduced down to 25 4 years later, and then 12 and a half 4 years later, and then 6.25. Right now, we're operating on a subsidy of 3 1/8. So moving from 3 1/8 down to 1.5625 Bitcoin in mid-2028 doesn't really change the available supply that much, or the circulating supply that much. So if that was a factor in the beginning, or the first couple of epochs, as we like to call them, that goes away. Second, we're now in a more mature asset where a lot of the buyers of Bitcoin we're seeing are price agnostic, right? We now have institutions, we have universities, we have pensions, we have public treasuries, public companies. There's now hundreds of them that are all stacking and buying. And so that just sort of supersedes and almost obviates the retail investors, where like the first 4-year cycle. Also, another thing to keep in mind with the 4-year cycles is that there's always been some kind of event where, proving that humans continue to be fallible, humans will scam. And the first cycle, we saw all of these initial coin offerings, and anyone, you or I, could spin up Brandon coin or Terence coin, and people were doing that, and they were making tons of money because they were rugging people. You had to be quick. You had to be sneaky. It was unregulated. The SEC, the CFTC, no one knew what was going on. And so those people got away with those scams until they didn't, until everyone realized that was vaporware. So that imploded the market, right? We fell from the high of 19,800 dropping down to like 3,500. And of course, the good thing is that people that really want to learn what Bitcoin is, they can't do much else. They've probably lost a lot of their money. They're like, wait a minute, I need to learn what this thing is. The second cycle was all of the CeFi, or centralized finance scams, right? That's when Sam Bankman-Fried said, hey, I have 70,000 Bitcoin on my FTX exchange. And guess what? There wasn't even one. That's when Alex Mashinsky of Celsius was saying, hey, unbank yourself. This is safer than a bank. This is freedom money. It's sovereign money. And of course, what he did, he rehypothecated the money, kept all the money. Do Kwon with Luna, Voyager, BlockFi, Vald. There were a ton of these companies, and it turns out they were all sort of doing the same thing. And they were all rehypothecating. They were all trying to create paper Bitcoin. And as we know, since Bitcoin is a hard bearer asset that is a sovereign commodity, you can't create more of it. And so when you try to, something bad happens. So could something happen in this cycle that we're in right now? And right now we're at the end of what would be the next 4-year cycle. Every 4 years, it's Thanksgiving time, right? It's like we get 3 Thanksgivings where our family's like, wow, you're into that Bitcoin thing. That's amazing. You're doing well. And we get that one Thanksgiving where they stare at you with skepticism and say, what the hell are you doing? Are you still into that Bitcoin thing? So technically, this Thanksgiving is a good one because this is the end of this next cycle. So, and by the way, that's proving to be true so far. The fourth quarter of 2025 is rising high. Now, to help make this episode more evergreen, I'll try not to stick too close to dates, but the way the cycles go, then the next Thanksgiving, we should be down. And we typically would then have like a 50, 60, all the way up to an 80% drop. But Bitcoin itself, being just a calculator or just a clock and just a fixed and fair measuring tool, it doesn't know anything about cycles. It doesn't care about cycles, right? Everything is just supply and demand. And back to the blocks, since the supply isn't going to be truncated that much for our next halving when the subsidy reduces in half, you have to take that factor out. 2, now because of the institutional buyers, the public companies, the ones that I just mentioned, their demand for Bitcoin has far exceeded what the retail investor was doing back in the 2017 cycle and then back in the 2022 cycle. Now, we still have new presidential administrations. We still have feds that cut rates, raise rates, cut, raise rates. So there do tend to be 4-year cycles in that sense, and that won't go away. But other than psychological, there's no reason that Bitcoin's price should go down significantly at all after this Thanksgiving, which it would if we were to follow the same. If people said, I don't know what Bitcoin is and I'm just looking at charts, they're going to start selling in Thanksgiving or Christmas because that would be the top. And here's the problem. I think some people will do that anyways. And if there's any type of event where it does dip for whatever reason because there was a little hack over here or, Elon Musk sold some Bitcoin and, retail gets scared, there could be a little drop. We've seen little drops, even as much as 10%. And then suddenly thinks, oh my God, the 4-year cycles are here. I better get out. So unless you just view Bitcoin as a fiat trade, I ask those people, so why would you get out? What are you going to go into? Where are you going to put that money? And then what? Your plan is to come back in? Well, factor in, your 15 or 20% federal capital gains taxes, because depending on your income level, on average, it's going to be 15%. If you make between $50,000 to $500,000 a year, you fall in that 15% range if it's a long-term capital gain. So you've held that Bitcoin over 12 months. So you're going to have to come back in at a 15% plus whatever your state is, and everyone's in a different place. Me being in California, I have a 13%. So at minimum, I'm basically looking at 25%. So wow, even if I had a crystal ball, I've got to be able to get back in 25% under just to break even. You see, like it doesn't, it's like there's that saying where you can't catch a falling knife and no one knows. Yeah. But back to my point, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but Bitcoin has reached the phase where we're at the institutional adoption. Now, we haven't even gotten to what will blow that out of the water, where we will start to see 100,000 candles in a week, and that's nation state adoption. Every cycle we're ahead of it. Like the very first couple epochs, it was always like, oh my God, is Microsoft going to buy? Is Amazon going to buy? Right? We were just looking at one company and hanging on to that. And then we thought the ETFs were going to happen and those got delayed, right? But now we have the 11 ETFs. We then thought nation state. Trump talked about a strategic Bitcoin reserve. El Salvador made it legal tender. Like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Major game theory. But what happened? That also got pushed down and it became the public treasury companies. And Michael Saylor, of course, wrote the playbook for that. And now we have, I want to say, 200 to 300 of these companies that are, I think it was like 188 last I counted, that were major public companies that are stacking Bitcoin. Now, they're not all doing LBEs or leveraged Bitcoin plays where they're, borrowing to buy. And that's risky, just like any individual. There's no difference. But, you or I, buying 0.001 Bitcoin, every other day to DCA is nothing compared to, Metaplanet that just bought 5,000, or, Cantor Fitzgerald that's going to buy 30,000, or, Sailor who's buying 10,000 randomly on Sunday nights. That just blows it out of the water, especially when right now, currently, there's only 450 Bitcoin that come into the available circulating supply. And then, of course, mid 2028, that pops down to 225 Bitcoin. That's not very much when you remind the world that this is a global, this is not just some US stock or US treasury. This is a global monetary money. And the world is starting to see it as perfect money and as perfect collateral. And since the global problem that we have is debt, everyone has debt, which is why we're all hyperinflating, because the only way we can address our debt is just to add more currency and inflate it away. They're going to start migrating to Bitcoin. And so in the longest answer ever on any podcast you've ever had, when you just ask what's happening with the government shutdown, it's like, yeah, people are starting to see Bitcoin as a safe haven. And we're seeing that for the first time, mostly just because of gold. We always knew that precious metals would move first, right? Precious metals have been money for 5,000 years, and gold has largely been flat for 2 to 3 decades. Like we've been dunking, Bitcoiners have been dunking on gold because it's like it just sits there and does nothing. And it's just been in the last 18 months to 2 years, suddenly like a skyrocket. And I think that surprised a lot of people. But that just shows you, because, you have 200 countries who are like, wait a minute, what are we going to do? We can't save in our currency. The geopolitical risks are out there. Hyperinflation is a risk. And because we're so global, you have to look at the BRICS nations. You have to look at our trade partners. And why wouldn't you want to have a neutral and agnostic, politically agnostic, fair token to trade in, right? Like, why would Russia or China or India want to trade in the US dollar when we can make it for free, but they have to work in it to pay us back? I'm saying everything that you already know, Brandon, but, for your audience.
The world is changing. Privacy, sovereignty, and freedom are no longer optional. They are essential. If you are still holding your Bitcoin on an exchange, you are vulnerable to your Bitcoin being frozen or the Bitcoin not even being there. In a world of broken trust, a fallen world, we need to be able to know through code, through math, that we have the keys to our wealth. We don't need to trust some third party. We don't need to trust some government. We don't need to trust some ruler on high that they're going to have our wealth and not censor it from us. Just ask European Union how that's going right now. And that's why at Foundation, they're building Bitcoin tools that are open source, privacy first, and actually simple to use. It's the only kind of Bitcoin crypto tools you should be using. The Passport Core is a Bitcoin-only hardware wallet, probably made in the USA. The only one that I know of, fully air-gapped, no Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to compromise your keys, with a large screen, seamless QR workflows, and encrypted micro SD backups. It is here for the average person or the advanced cryptographer as well. Along with your purchase, you get the attachments, the USB-C cord, the iOS and Android attachments, micro SD card, and the USB-C cable. You don't have to go searching around for everything. You also get the free Envoy mobile app as well. You can buy Bitcoin straight into your self-custody. It helps you set up your Passport Core, label and track your coins, manage your keys, and do so much more. Foundation built the core and their company for sovereignty and freedom for all of humanity. You can take back control of your money and your digital life now. Get started today at foundation.xyz/Brandon, foundation.xyz/BRANDON, or check the link in the description.
Yeah, no, these are phenomenal points to bring up for the audience, for the average person. I mean, this is something where, you and I have gone down these rabbit holes for 10,000 hours each. For those who don't know, I mean, the last interview you and I did, Terence, I mean, has, 35,000 views. A lot of people found it very handy. Terence wrote a book on Bitcoin, one of the many great books out there, Proof of Money. And unfortunately, I don't have it with me. I showed it last time I had it with me.
It's okay.
So, yeah, people can
here's
go.
The sideways
there we
version.
go. There we go. Phenomenal book.
Not that I had it ready for you, but
no, well, hey, you're the author, so
they're propping up this mic. They're literally propping up my mic.
My book's propping this up too. I think, but I have some other ones right now that are. I've got Know Thy Enemy.
Oh wow, hardcore.
Book. Yeah, and Thank God for Bitcoin. So I've got some, each end of the
That's
spectrum.
a terrific one.
Yeah. So each end of the spectrum, you got to know your enemy. You got to know your friends. Keep your enemies closer. So that's and so I think that's important though to raise some of these points, because not everyone thinks like that and has gone down these rabbit holes. And written books. I mean, and that why your book is so great, and for anyone who wants to go pick it up, it touches on so many things, and it's very digestible and easy to read, and it goes through a lot of these things. So I guess in saying all that, I would love for you to touch on and just unpack for a little bit just some of the unit cost bias that people have, because you touched on Metaplanet. People get very distracted. And this is, you touched on a lot of good points here. I want to try to wrap up, or have you kind of unpack a bit more, and I'm trying to wrap it up in a question in the sense of, we talked about altcoins and people getting scammed, and then people having to try to save and other things outside their own money, which is what money is supposed to do, is keep your time and energy. And it does anything but that. So they have to put it into real estate. They've got to put it, which is one of your expertises, put it in all these other assets, go out the risk curve, get into scam coins, all these other altcoins. And because they don't have something they can just save, and they're not educated that they just can save in Bitcoin, and the hardest money known to man. You have so on the other side of it is you have Metaplanet, you've got, you see what Michael Saylor is doing, and they're buying all this Bitcoin, and the average person looks at that and is just like, my goodness, like I can't do that. And then they put their head down, and then they walk away, and they get dejected, and they try to go find something else that's, a penny stock, an altcoin scam, or whatever it is. And then the cycle kind of repeats. So I would love your thoughts on just that. And, again, this is where we see it a lot in the marketing world, where it's, 0.1 Bitcoin. And like you just said, people get dejected because they buy. And I've had people, and they're like, yeah, I got 0.00001 Bitcoin. That's all my buy was worth. And it's, how do you reframe that for people? Like, when, you talk to a ton of people, you face, like, how do you reframe that for people to kind of break that mindset and break them out of that reality of, it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you're getting. The fact that you have any sats at all is the important thing. It's suffocating this old corrupt system that's beating you down.
Yeah. So I can answer that in a couple ways. First, we live in sort of the Truman Show, and which means we live in this fake world, right? We are constantly consuming these envy generators like Instagram, where everyone looks better than us, and they have a better life, and all to sell us products. And so because of this, we end up with fake food and fake bonds, and because of this, we get trapped into this external scorecard, to where numbers are really important. We're always measuring things, and it's like, what's your GPA? Am I going to get the corner office? Is my name going to be on the parking stone outside? What's my title now? Am I going to go from manager to director to VP? Am I now executive VP? Am I senior VP? Am I going to get a plaque? You're now employee of the month. No one really cares, but we care because we're trying to measure things. And the same happens for money, where we don't think about, at least I didn't think about until I came into Bitcoin, and even having studied business and whatnot and economics, I never thought about anything outside of the numbers. We always say, grow your money. I think every investing book out there, every kid and adult has read, it's grow your money. Well, the truth is, money doesn't grow. It's actually just the opposite as far as in the fiat world. Political currency units, as I like to call fiat, is just currency. It's not money, and it doesn't grow. It actually shrinks. But because we look at a $20 bill and it has the same dimensions and it still has the number 20 on it, we think, that's a $20 bill. When I get this $20 bill, I can hang on to it. In 10 years, I can pull it out from under a mattress. It's still a $20 bill. But if money is really just half of the trade, if it's just a sacrifice scorecard that says, I am authenticating what you did in the past, so now that you can expend it today, in the present, or the future, if that's all it represents, well, then money does the opposite of grow. It actually shrinks. And back in the days and in other countries, they saw this because monetary debasement, where we get the word, literally was the coin getting shrinker and smaller. And so people could visually see, oh, it is smaller, right? We knew that it was being shaved, or cheaper metals were being used. We also knew, like when Dionysius the Elder, he would tell everyone, the Greek dictator in Syracuse said, turn in your drachma coins. And the one he would stamp with a 2. They would visually see, well, it's the same size, but now it's a 2. So it's hard for us, at least in the Western world, or especially here in the United States, when we are holding these same dollar bills ever since grandma gave us, a $20 bill for birthday and a birthday card. It's like, well, it still feels like $20. Okay. So we know that we can't hold our purchasing power in currencies. We know we have to use money. The problem is when we switch from the coinage to the commodity, when we switch from political currencies to money, which are what people choose, what people find, gold, seashells, feather, tobacco, whatever, we have to remove the number. And I know this sounds crazy, but whatever you earn, you go and you build that swimming pool, and you spend 10 hours building that swimming pool, and you only need 10 hours of that swimming pool's energy to, cover your expenses for the next 2 weeks. What are you going to do with that other extra 8 hours of energy? You need to save it somewhere. So forget about the number. Cutting to the chase, just put it in Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what the number is. Think of it as this magic box. It's just this vessel, and I'm going to pour, so like often I'll tell people, even before they understand Bitcoin, that you just don't get Bitcoin. And in fact, I'll talk to you in just fiat terms, because that's what you understand. As much as it pains me to just talk in fiat terms, I'll say, okay, don't buy Bitcoin. Hang on to dollars. You love dollars? Save your dollars in this vehicle called Bitcoin. Just save them. You're going to make more dollars, because remember, you can't make your money grow. You can't make your currencies grow. So you need more of them. So, and unfortunately, there are some people that will never, ever, ever understand Bitcoin, and they don't care. They're going to continue to see it as a trade. Okay, fine. Let's start that as a first step. Great. So you know what you're going to do? You want more dollars. Hey, you have $100,000. Would you rather have 200,000? Great. Pour your dollars into this company. It's called Bitcoin Inc. Put it into Bitcoin Inc. You're going to now have, in fact, right now, 12 months later, everybody's money in Bitcoin has doubled. Everyone's currency in Bitcoin has doubled. I obviously hope that you do too, of course, Brandon, we all hope that they learn about Bitcoin and start using that as their unit of account, pricing things in Bitcoin, because you create your own deflationary world, regardless of what clown world is doing. But until they do, you can also just teach them that, like, forget about the number, just save in Bitcoin. Sell your dollars or convert your dollars and save in Bitcoin, and get away from the unit bias, because the unit bias will kill you. They're going to say that it's a train that I can't catch. Wow, it's already at 1 Bitcoin. I'm never going to have 1 Bitcoin. But why do you need a Bitcoin? You don't need a whole Bitcoin, And even though I'm not part of that argument where people say, oh, let's rename Satoshi's Bitcoin so that there's 100 million Satoshis in a Bitcoin. Oh, now there's 100 million. It is true that would help normies. That's why they get distracted by Dogecoin or Polkadot or whatever, because it's like, oh wow, I can own 300,000 Shiba Inus for a couple of bucks. And this helped me actually a long time ago. I forget who said it or where I read it, but someone said, just think of Bitcoin as a savings technology and nothing more. Just think of it as savings. So anything that you want to save, money that you don't need for the next 4 years, 5 years, you don't need it for the wedding coming up or a medical bill or the house down payment. Just save in Bitcoin. The amount doesn't matter. And I think that's powerful.
Do you think that we get, it's really funny. Like I've always been on the side of, just not, why would we change, Bitcoin? Why would you change the name? But you just bringing that up again, it does make me lean a little bit more towards the side of changing the name. Now I'm not quite there where I'm going to advocate for it yet. However, the thing that scares me the most, and I would love your thoughts on this, the thing that scares me the most, and we're seeing it in the Bitcoin infighting right now with, the Core 30, and we're seeing, and Michael Saylor has talked about this for years with, and George Gammon has debated Jeff Booth about this. We've had these debates where people line up, and a lot of people get it logically, but there's a lot of people that say, that's awesome, but like humans don't operate in logic. Like what you're saying is true, like a George Gammon versus Jeff Booth debate. If anyone goes back and watches those, they're great debates. And they kind of synthesize it down at the end to like, yeah, we agree in the same thing, but George generally believes that people just aren't going to understand it 100 years from now. It'll revert back and we'll be doing the same stupid things, which I can't disagree with George. I mean, where I'm going with this is, money to me is psychological. It's a psychological engine. If people believe there's inflation, there's going to be inflation. Like if people believe Bitcoin is the thing, they believe, look at the dollar. It's completely fake, as you've brilliantly outlined, yet people use it every day. We're still using it. It's still working, and it's based on nothing. It's just complete confidence that it's actually going to buy you something next day. So where I'm going with all this is, the thing that's scary to me is we are fighting this fight, and you're trying to educate enough people, but our Bitcoiners, do we use too much logic at times and not appeal to emotion? And that's where, I know a lot of people in the Bitcoin crowd get sick of Stop at the 0.1 Bitcoin or stop with it. And it's like, there's a psychological element to humans that we have to understand as Bitcoiners. And if we just operate over here in logic land and like, hey, this is what it is, like, I'm only going to talk this way, you're going to alienate like 95% of the human population. Like, they don't operate, so like, I would just love your thoughts on that, because I think we're fighting a psychological battle that is very, very hard to win. And again, look at the founding fathers. I brought this up probably last time. I brought this up a lot. I'm working on a book about this. About 3% of the people picked up their muskets and said, hey, we're going to battle. 97% didn't care. They were apathetic. They were scared. They were like, whatever, the king's great. Let's negotiate more. And 3% said, F off. We're done. I'm done with this. We're going the last option here. And it feels like that's not the muskets part, but it feels like there's going to be a couple percent of the population that drags everyone else across the finish line, because there's just like this bridge that a lot of us, I think Bitcoiners, have a hard time crossing, this idealism versus pragmatism of we see a future, right? So anyway, I would love your thoughts on this before I keep rambling anymore.
Yeah, it's difficult. Part of the problem, I think, is that when Bitcoin was introduced to the public, they viewed Bitcoin as just a stock or a trade. It was like, oh, here's this token. What do you do? Well, you buy it, and later you could sell it. And so they just viewed it as, a meme stock in a way. And in many ways, it was a meme stock. They didn't view or look at Bitcoin, the network. They didn't realize that it's the network that is so valuable. They didn't realize that this is a protocol. Like, even a lot of us hardcore Bitcoiners, when we first came into Bitcoin, we just thought, oh, I should buy this token. It might be worth something someday. Even Satoshi said, you might want to get some in case it catches on. And even Hal Finney talked about that. And like, yeah, this could be pretty big. Might want to buy some. And so we all looked at Bitcoin, the token, right? So we're looking at, so that falls in the categories of investment and trader and speculator. Meanwhile, what is really valuable about Bitcoin is the protocol. And similar to the internet comparison, it's like, what if back when the internet first came about, what if there was an internet token? What if someone said, as the internet grows, as people build on it, and it becomes a flea market and a screening room and a dating app, and it becomes all these things, and it connects, and we get this crowdsourcing and gig economy and whatever you want to call it, and the information of everything. What if you could invest in a token that captures and contains how valuable that is? Same with Fire token. What if I could do that with Fire? When the Fire first came out, people were scared. People ran from it. People still ate cold food. It wasn't until they learned to harness Fire that their brains doubled in size. They increased their caloric intake, and we grew and prospered. Same with electricity. Oh, people are going to get tangled in wires. Why do we need that? We can kill whales. We have candles, right? And same with writing. I mean, even people like Plato, who we herald as one of the greats, said, why do we need to write? We can speak. Oratory is just fine, right? But writing was relegated to the church, right? And the Catholic Church controlled the narrative. And it wasn't until Gutenberg came out and said, and he wasn't, by the way, against the church. He just said, I would like a way to free information from the church so that we could think for ourselves. And which is basically what Satoshi did. Satoshi never wanted to topple the banks. He knew that we would need to financialize Bitcoin, that there would have to be Bitcoin loans, Bitcoin banks. Hal Finney has also talked about this. And so because we didn't learn when we first came into Bitcoin what I just said, that it's a protocol, that it's this agnostic, neutral network for the world to trade in, to, the internet of value. Because of that, because we got distracted by Bitcoin, here's the little logo, here's the little coin, here's the little app I can buy it on. Because of that, people don't see it as anything bigger than that. They haven't seen it as a moral imperative, the spirituality of it, the philosophy of it, how it helps you, improves you to be you. You can show up to be who you need to be, who you want to be, because really it just does what we've never had. And that's the big psyop and programming of you've had a savings account or we've had a way of saves. Until Bitcoin came along, there has been zero savings. And I can debate anyone on this. Show me one way we have ever been able to save before Bitcoin. And no one can, you can't. It didn't exist. We would find things and we'd have substitutes and surrogates that we would call money, but they weren't perfect because, Someone else can fake the seashells. So, we can have fake gold. How much gold is there? By the way, all the gold that we've brought up from the ground is less than 2% of the entire supply, which we still don't finitely even know. And so what have we had? We've had political currency units. We've had fiat. Well, we already know that we can't save in fiat. A savings account. What is a savings account? It's like you and I know this, Brandon, but the normies, it blows their mind when you tell them, have you ever looked at the fine print when you open up a savings account and you get 0.01% at Wells Fargo? Do you know what the wording tells you? It says that you are lending them. They just say, hey, give us, we'll save your money here. It's safe. They just got a free loan from you at 0.01%. It's just insane. So it's the whole reason why I called the book Proof of Money. To me, Bitcoin, it's the first time that we have proven that we actually have money, and which means we actually have a savings account. Because if money can't authenticate that the receipt that you're carrying for what you want later, it isn't money. If I go to a restaurant, Brandon, and I park my car and I get that valet ticket, if when I come out of the restaurant and I give them that valet ticket and I have 90% less of my car, like one of the wheels is missing, well, then that's not a valet ticket. And to me, it's that simple. To a lot of Bitcoiners, it's that simple. So gosh, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think that is part of the big problem is that normies don't realize that it's all about the network, and that the token just allows you to ride with the appreciation of the network. The more people that adopt the network, the more people that say, this is my savings account, you get to benefit. The more people that say, let's use this as a payment service because we don't have to trust anyone in the middle. We don't have to, and we have pure access anytime. And we may not think about it here in this world, but in other worlds where there's authoritarian regimes, where there's capital controls, where they're disenfranchised, it's everything. It's life to them. So if people start to think about that and then just save in Bitcoin and say, well, Bitcoin will go up if more people agree that this is valuable. Yes, on one hand, it's a collective hallucination, like you were just talking about. It is a story, it is a narrative, but so is everything, right? Could tomorrow everyone say, I don't want to save in Bitcoin, and it collapse the network? And for sure, but that's not going to happen for the same reason it didn't happen to language, didn't happen to writing, it didn't happen to electricity, it didn't happen to fire. We all find those things valuable.
Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter. If you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party, this is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. What do we have here? 12-word seed plate. After a long wait and everything being sold out, this is now here, the 12-word seed plate. For those who have been asking, store your generational wealth in titanium forever. Do not make the mistake of storing it on paper. This can withstand fire, nuclear fallout, wind. We've driven over it. We shot hockey pucks at it. We've checked it. We've thrown it. We've done everything possible. Do not pass down your generational wealth on paper. Put it in titanium. Go to stampseed.com. Put in code Brandon, BRANDON, for 15% off store-wide. Do not be a statistic. Show your family how much you love them. Store your generational wealth forever in titanium. Code Brandon, 15% off store-wide.
Yeah, it's so true. There's language is a whole nother thing too, actually, like the decentralization of language. Fascinating. That's a whole nother rabbit hole for a different day. So I'm not going to go down
I love that.
right. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that more too. There's another guy that's really smart guy that over the years of just he's got a lot into that. So we have to have a chat on that someday. Maybe get into spaces even. But gold and silver. Before I go to real estate, because that can be a rabbit hole that you and I go down for a little bit. So I want to talk about gold and silver really quick though, because that's obviously in the news. More people are seeing that. I mean, silver's at all-time highs pretty much right now for itself. Gold keeps breaking new all-time highs, and I would love your thoughts on, and because we've touched on this a little bit, some of these things, but I would love for you to just kind of touch on Terence, you just said gold and silver has been money for thousands of years. So I'd love for you for a minute or two to explain why gold and silver, why do we keep having this problem that gold and silver, we keep getting in this cycle of gold and silver not working for thousands of years also, right? It's the best thing we've had, but it's also, it's not the perfect money. And it's not the proof of money that we need in the civilization that we have right now. So I would love your thoughts and for that for a minute, explaining that to everybody.
Yeah, sure. So, we know what the definition of money is, and we know what the properties are that the best money should have. And we know that it needs to be durable. It needs to be able to store your value. It needs to be portable. It needs to be secure. It needs to be fungible. It needs to be verifiable. All of these things that we know. But the most important thing is that it needs to be as hard and as scarce as possible. And metal, of course, has been that because it is an element of nature. You can't violate nature, right? You can violate paper. You can duplicate paper. You can counterfeit paper. You can't do that with metals. And so that's why metals has been chosen by the people as the best money over time. The problem is it's very difficult to secure from theft. There's an incentive, for me to kill you and take your gold, because if you're dead, I can grab it. How do I move it? How do I send it across space? And, it's like once, Lynn Alden has talked about this, it's like once our communication evolved, like with Morse code and with the telegraph, and we could send communication quickly across, halfway across the world and say, hey, I'm paying you, 100 ounces of gold for this thing. We couldn't transfer, we couldn't settle, we couldn't bring the gold, right? So we had to have the gold guilds, and we had to have companies and kings and whatnot hold the gold, and they would just issue a receipt. And in theory, that makes perfect sense. If trust is not an issue, if humans aren't fallible, that sounds great. Let me put a ton of gold here, give me all these receipts, and I'll just operate on the receipts, and we just trade the receipts, but the gold sits there. Well, we've lost trust in all of that. Italian banks, Venezuelan banks, China, major nation states, using all of their best alchemists and authenticators have found that they've had fake gold, filled with tungsten, filled with copper. People haven't known. We don't even know how much we have. It's a sort of a big poker game. The U.S. says we have all this gold in Fort Knox. I mean, I don't believe it's empty, but do we know? And is there an incentive for them to broadcast or to present to other countries that they have more than they do? Maybe, but then another country is going to do it. And then Russia says this, and then India says this. And how do we even know? So, the reason that gold, has these long periods of doing nothing is in a sense that, so like prior to 1971, when we were on a gold standard and there was gold settlement, mostly at the nation state level as an asset, when everything is working and there's enough gold and there isn't a gold run, it works and it's been fine. And that's why gold has largely been creeping up. But when we've gone on a fiat standard, it's largely gone flat or even gone down because we're able to see that they can just issue as much fiat as they want and it's no longer tied to gold. Like I challenge anyone to take whatever dollar bills you have and try to go into any major bank or wealth fund and say, I would like gold. You can't do that. And so also, I think the younger generations could care less. It's like less than 3% of millennials own gold and almost no Gen Zs own gold. And the only gold that they really have is if like grandma or great grandma, passed down some necklace or a ring or whatever. But then what are you going to do if you want that to be money? Where do you go? You're going to go to a pawn shop? There's going to be like some big 20% fee. They're going to have to melt it down to find out if it's real. Maybe it's not even real. It's just very cumbersome. So, Bitcoin, if you want to call it digital gold, I hate calling it digital gold, by the way. I know that's, I'm in the minority, but if you want to call it digital gold, then it solves all those problems because we can verify it and we can fractionalize it and move it at the speed of light. So what we're seeing currently with metals rise really fast tells me that people are scared, tells me that there is this flight to safety because this has been sturdy historical safety around the world. But we're also in the digital age. At a certain point, they're going to be like, oh, why wouldn't I want the digital version of that, right? We have dematerialized and digitized everything else in our life, almost practically everything. I mean, look at us now. Like, why would you not do that for value? Like it seems so archaic and analog that I'm going to hold this gold and dig it in my backyard. Like, that's just sounds scary to me. I personally, I've never owned gold in my life. I don't know a thing about gold. I mean, I've been to pawn shops and I've done TV shows where people have melted gold. I've seen the process, but it's like, is this good gold? Is that bad gold? What form do you put it in? And then you're stuck with a certain unit of account, whatever that gold is. So to me, Bitcoin made perfect sense because I've always lived in the digital world. I mean, I love the internet. I've embraced the internet. Like, it's, it's provided so much access, and it's, decentralized and democratized so much information. Why shouldn't our money also do the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. I could not agree more. It's, like you said, ironically, the physical properties of why a lot of people want to own gold and silver are what hold it back from a global economy, which is,
there you go.
The true irony in all of it.
That was a better and shorter answer.
Well,
yeah, that was a good one. Yeah, it's the physicality.
So a couple people will get that part, but most people need the actual explanation though from you. So I'm glad that
well, it's the digital scarcity, and that took me a while to understand. Yes. When I was learning about Bitcoin, that's where I really dug into, because that was the part that did also keep me back, because the physicality we get. Hey, I'm holding this. I own it. I can do whatever I want anytime, like a dollar, right? People want to bag on the dollar, but I'll tell you this, it is a bearer asset. No one knows where it came from. No one knows where it's going. I can spend it anytime, right? It just can't save, of course. But once I learned about digital scarcity, how that was one of Satoshi's genius inventions, it's like, oh, it isn't just a right click copy. Like, I can just spend all this time writing a Microsoft Word document and I can send it to you, Brandon. And in a sense, I've just devalued it because you have the exact same copy, and then you can post it online and everyone else can take it. And it's like Bitcoin is the only thing that can't do that. Why? Well, because Bitcoin isn't technically a coin. Each coin is a ledger from the day it was mined to everywhere it's been until it got to you. And that's what you're holding, is you're holding this little round ledger. And so no two ledgers will be identical.
It's remarkable. That's remarkable. Okay, so real estate though. So this is our wheelhouses for the last decade or two, doing a lot of the real estate. I would love for you to unpack for a few minutes why, because real estate obviously is a very glamorous thing. I always say it's the last thing. The fiat debt-based legacy monetary Titanic. The dollar, the system we use globally around the world it's the Titanic, and it hit an iceberg. You could say 1913, maybe 33, or, for 43, you could say 71, 64. Like, there's all these dates of like, just keeps hitting icebergs, and the thing is taking on water, and it's about to crack in half if it hasn't already. And real estate's like the last thing on that fiat Titanic to go in the water. So like, it looks the sexiest for the longest amount of time, but it's still going to the bottom of the ocean with everything else. And so I would love your thoughts on just real estate and why. So I guess moral of the whole story though is people see it as a glamorous thing, right? HGTV, we're going to flip homes. People don't realize the work that needs to go into doing those things, the resources, the work, the experience. Almost no one can do that. Yet people are trying to become real estate investors, buy extra houses. They don't know all what goes into that, but they're forced out this risk curve to save because of the 1 cent they get every month in savings, like you alluded to earlier. So I would love, Terence's thoughts from someone who's lived this life for a long time and still lives it. And you love real estate. And it's one of the things that brings you income to save in Bitcoin with. So I would love your thoughts and unpack this and just why in squaring these circles.
Yeah. So in general, and especially for people that aren't passionate about being a landlord, passionate about flipping a home, and don't own the tools, and if that's not your vocation, if that's not your why, your purpose, or any of these woo-woo things, if that's not your thing, and for most people it isn't. Most people approach real estate outside of however they decide to live. They approach it as a way to hurdle inflation, as a way to, again, make more dollars, because your money can't grow. You need more dollars. And the problem is, and this is the whole reason, is that real estate is at the top of the funnel of where the money printing begins. When the central bank needs to inject money into the economy, one of the very first things they do is they lower the interest rates so that people can get real estate, because real estate largely it represents the entire economy. When someone buys a home, and then now you got to hire interior designers and carpenters and workers and floor guys and whatever, And, there's all the taxes, and then the maintenance, and, and then the gardeners and the window washers. And it's like, it just trickles down through an entire economy of services. And so, one, real estate sits at the top of the money printer. It's the best way to inject it in. And if you have to play the fiat game of money printing, meaning you're going to be debased if you don't now acquire as many of those new dollars pouring in the system as possible, one of the best and easiest ways to do that is real estate. It really is. Unfortunately, the initiation for that, the payment to get into that, is a lot of friction. And it could be physical friction. It could be falling off the ladder, nailing your thumb, inhaling asbestos, which I'm sure I have done when many houses, all of that stuff, on top of the toilets, the trash, the tenants, and the taxes. And so, I sometimes think, what if these aliens came down from another planet and they saw us and they said, wait, how are these people growing their wealth? How are they saving? And they said, oh, look, they're saving in cars. Why would they save in cars? Cars deteriorate. They drive them around. They get rusty. They break down. Why would anyone save in cars? Well, we wouldn't. That sounds absolutely retarded. But how is that any different than a house? A house is just a utility for us to live, but it deteriorates. It's exposed to weather. On top of that, we have to pay taxes. Even if someone gave you a house for free, I said, Brandon, here's a free $4 million house for you. Oh my God. Well, you're going to pay $5,000 a month just in property taxes. Even if it's free, that's $5,000 a month and I gave you just a free house. So the reason real estate becomes so attractive is, one, there's a narrative that we've been given ever since we were little kids. They're not making any more land. Real estate, is the American dream. And if you're responsible and smart, you're going to put your money in real estate. It sounds like you're doing something. And because we all want to be the hero of our own story, you sound like a hero. Brandon, wow, you found this house. I'm now painting it and I'm knocking down some walls. And then I'm going to turn it into an Airbnb and all this stuff. That's great. But what you've done is you've bought yourself a business. You've exposed yourself to risk, yourself to liability. You're taking yourself away from what you do, like maybe your, whatever your thing is, like, you're a hockey coach. You might be the best hockey coach and these kids need you, and your skills of that now just being taken away to where everybody else is migrating. Like every time this is sad, but every time the central banks print and real estate starts going up because of that, just in dollar terms, because more dollars are required, you get doctors, you get attorneys, you get people that are really good at what they do leave and go into real estate. My own ex-entertainment attorney, an amazing entertainment attorney, he used to be the head dude at William Morris, and then he was my entertainment attorney. When we went through the last big real estate boom, he left. I'm like, where did you go? And he's now selling houses in Brentwood. I'm like, what? And, I don't want to take away from realtors who enjoy that lifestyle, but they'll even tell you it doesn't take much to be a realtor. And, when there's a lot of money printing, it's not that difficult to walk around and show a house and then, someone buys it. And we don't even really need it nowadays with online. But so real estate becomes attractive because the money's first coming in there. And if you want to grab the money first before down here, because it's not worth as much down here, if you want to grab it up top, real estate has been the place. But it's not passive like Bitcoin is. You can't just put it there and let it just grow while you do anything but have to think about that. So, like when you watch HGTV and you hear about all these people are like Grant Cardone, those people are professionals and those people are, grinding 12, 14 hours a day and they're sleeping at the house at night. And, like my first house that I did, like it was, I had like 9 pots and pans out and it was raining on it and there were walls that were missing. And I had to go to the bathroom outside for like the first week. Like, it was pretty crazy. Now I ended up loving and enjoying that. So that ended up being a way for me to mine fiat to get into Bitcoin. But most of my friends, most people, they don't want to do that. And I've seen a lot of people get wrecked. As we're now seeing now, there was a big Airbnb boom. So related to the whole real estate boom, that's just a subsidiary of that. All of a sudden, everyone's going to do an Airbnb. Why? Because the interest rates are so low. And what happened in COVID, the interest rates dropped down to like 2.2%. I mean, that's like practically free money. So people are getting all this money. They're doing all these Airbnbs. Well, those loans have reset into fixed mortgages. The rates went up. And, now what's happening, and a lot of those people are trying to sell, and a lot of those people have been losing, as well as losing sleep and, stress and their sanity and whatnot. So, real estate for so many reasons is a terrible store of value. And if you look at real estate in terms of Bitcoin or even gold, it actually just goes down. Yeah, it requires more dollars. Those dollars are worth less, but it's really not retaining. You know what it's doing? At best, what real estate is doing is it's keeping you in line with inflation. So you're not really losing your money, but again, you have to work for it. You have to work for it. You have to pay taxes and insurance and theft and security, and you have to take care of all of this stuff. And for working this second or third job, you can just keep the purchasing power of your money. That's a lot. And, a lot of people in real estate are like, oh yeah, I sold this house and I made this and I made that. Well, they don't tell you about the ones they lost on, and they don't tell you how long they've been sitting there. Like, yeah, well, I doubled my money on my house. Yeah, but you've been there for 9 years, and now add all the expenses that you've paid, you haven't really doubled your money. So I don't know. I know we went so deep in real estate on the last one. I'm trying to avoid some of those same talking points, but
yeah. No, it's great. Yeah, and if people want to watch that, we did a real deep dive, on that. Which, again, maybe next year we'll go take some different routes in the real estate and kind of touch on some of the things. I think we'll have plenty when there is some type of protracted bear market, quote unquote. That'll be a time we can deep dive into some of these things, talk about the fundamentals more of what's actually happening. So,
well, here's something I'll say real quick that is interesting, and I think about this a lot. So, a lot of us Bitcoiners, we bag on real estate because we know that Bitcoin is just a pure and more peaceful solution for saving, and multiples more measured in fiat terms than real estate. Like, it just hands down, real estate cannot compare. And it's why we're seeing some of the biggest real estate people like Grant Cardone migrate and move everything over into Bitcoin. But one of the main reasons, I'd say one of the top 3 reasons that Bitcoiners are saving in Bitcoin, one of them is that they want a home. So I get that. I get that they want a home. So at a certain point, you have to sort of reconcile with yourself that a certain amount of Bitcoin you are going to spend that will never grow as fast as just sitting in Bitcoin, right? But if money ultimately is for the things that you need and want, you're going to just have to be okay with that. Because once you shave off a certain amount of Bitcoin and you buy a house for you and your family, well, in Bitcoin terms, that house is just going to continue to go down, 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 down compared to Bitcoin. You're always going to be better off in Bitcoin, but you don't want to sit there until you're, 89 and say, well, now I can get this house because it keeps coming down in Bitcoin terms, right? Like I said this on your last podcast, this house that I'm in right now costs 1,818 Bitcoin, 1,818 Bitcoin to buy this house. But today it's worth 15. And I know in about 5 years, it's going to be worth 2. So that tells you, oh, well, that's good. I can delay my gratification. I can, save rather than spend, create rather than consume, build and innovate rather than gamble until I actually need it. And I think that's a good thing, right? That lowers the prices for other people that need it exactly when they need it. I'm not just buying it as a piggy bank. But you have to reconcile with that. And I myself, my family, we are looking at other houses. Even though we love this house, there are other houses that have features that we want. And I'm telling you, every time I look at these houses, I'm like, okay, wow, this is going to cost this amount of Bitcoin. I know 4 or 5 years, it's going to be half that amount of Bitcoin. It's like, but it's good. It's good because it really makes me, I've bought houses in the past on a whim. The house I live in right now, I bought online when I was living in New York. I was just like, click, 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 sight unseen. I'm not going to do that with Bitcoin. It's like, oh man, do I really need it? And that's what I like. I like that, people joke with Bitcoiners like, oh yeah, you're going to buy the Lambo and all this. It's like, no. That's crypto. That's the scammy vaporware stuff. Bitcoiners are the opposite. We want to minimize, we want abundance. We want scarcity. We say like, what do I absolutely need so that I can care about what is more important to me, which is my family, how I think, how I live, the things that I care about, the experiences and whatnot. So I hate to beg on real estate for that reason, because I know Bitcoiners want to get that, but it will help us think of it just for us and our family, not as a piggy bank. And I have 9 properties here, 10 properties there. That's going to be, and I would hope that's the reframe. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so important. I was talking to Jeff Walton about this the other day, and that's
I love Jeff.
yeah, he's phenomenal. And I guess at this point, or at the point that people are probably seeing this episode, his will probably have come out, or maybe a week or so prior, so people have seen it, so we can talk about it. But we a lot of that episode we were talking about reframing and just how to we were talking about Marty Bent's opportunity cost, that the extension that you can put on your Brave browser or Chrome browser or whatever, which is phenomenal. And we were talking about the 0.1 Bitcoin. We were talking about which I don't know if the site is I don't know if it was Ant or somebody who was priced in Bitcoin21.com. I can't remember who was maintaining.
Oh, I think that might have been Ant. Yeah,
I think it was. And I know it was a lot to kind of maintain. So I don't know if he's been maintaining it currently, but it's such a phenomenal way to start because for years, this is where like 15 years ago, the crash happened. And I was still somewhat young and I didn't have a lot of extra money. I was 15 years ago in the crash. I was leaving college. And so I was playing hockey, and so I was going into the minor leagues, and you're just like sitting there looking at stuff. You're like, wow, I wish I had tons of capital or resources or connections where I could raise money and buy all this cheap real estate. Well, for 5, 6, 7, 8 years after that, I was largely just kind of understanding and studying money and knowing, hey, this has got to come back down because this is completely unsustainable. But the thing that I didn't understand, and I don't think I'm alone. I mean, you saw and people make fun of Robert Kiyosaki, who is one of my biggest mentors. You make fun of the Robert Kiyosakis of the world, or the Harry Dents, or the Jim Rickards, or a lot of these guys over the years are like, oh, Chicken Little, you're always saying it's crashing. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, they're all wrong until they're right. And so what I don't think any of us could foresee is the amount of tools the Fed would use to just keep pumping hot air into the balloon. And we didn't realize how big the balloon could get and the bubble could get.
Right.
They could just keep pumping liquidity and cash into the system. I mean, look at the debt from 15 years ago to what it is now. I mean, that's literal insanity. I mean, that's insane behavior that our country is going through. And so what I'm getting at is, the reframe for me was understanding that there is an invisible crash happening. And Mike Maloney taught me this 15 years ago, the gold and silver world, which is when you price assets against each other, you price things in terms of gold at the time. Obviously, he's a gold dealer, silver dealer. But when you do it in Bitcoin, obviously everything's going to zero. And that's where I was like, oh my gosh, like 5, 6 years ago, it dawned on me, end of the last decade. That's when I really was like, one of my orange pilling moments was like, oh my gosh, the crash is happening. I just didn't see it. It was I was looking at all the wrong assets. I was looking at dollars and I was looking at, gold and silver, and you couldn't see it.
You can't measure it against something that keeps growing. There's no way to measure it.
So that was like one of the big aha moments, the network effect, carrying wealth in your head, but also seeing this invisible crash when you price everything in Bitcoin. So that's the one thing I could say is like everything you're alluding, it just made me think of all this. It's the reframe of understanding that that there isn't a crash going on, but you have to own Bitcoin in order to be the benefactor of that crash. And so I think that's the big takeaway. For I hope anybody to see that's what's going on. So, man,
well, we measure everything against a fixed measuring tool. It's like, how come money, at least on a fiat standard, we don't? And, if money really just represents our past time, right? The time that we get put into the economy. So money is the intermediary, right? Until I can then expend this in the future. If money is just your time, well, look at a clock. Well, okay, there's 12 numbers on a clock, so that means we have 24 hours in a day. What if the government came in and said, you know what? Everyone's complaining there isn't enough time in the day. You guys don't have time to do enough stuff. You work, you come home, you cook, you have to sleep. There isn't enough time. We've decided to add 3 numbers on the clock. Now there's 15. So, now you're going to get 30 hours in a day instead of 24 hours in a cycle. Amazing. You got 6 more hours. Well, if this was in fiat terms, everyone's like, oh my God, this is fantastic. Now I can go do this. I can go see this movie. I can do that. Yeah, but they don't realize that each hour, since there's now 30, is really essentially 48 minutes instead of 60. And that's what happens with fiat. And so it's like, same with your value. If you're not measured with a fixed stick, like a measuring tool, like a tape measure or a scale, you're just measuring against something that's growing. And so it just doesn't make sense. Bitcoin, because there's only 21 million. Wow. If you measure everything, like I just did with the value of this house, whether it's your salary, everything is going to go down against Bitcoin. And it just does create a better world. Here's the thing. And the reason why we're still not going to see it, and we're going to continue to hyperinflate and go into debt like crazy and crazy and crazy, because that's one part of the fraction. The GDP, our gross domestic product, is going to continue to go up, and we're entering a phase where that's going to go hyperbolic too because of AI. AI is going to increase productivity so much that even though we're hyperinflating and we're spending so much on debt, our revenue is going to keep going up. So it'll look like we're okay. Like, oh, we're okay. We've only got this percentage of our GDP that's in debt. And that's the problem, which is going to just hyperinflate away our money. But it's like, oh, but AI. So
yeah,
here in the Western world, at least, if that's where most of your audience is, it's going to continue for a long time. Fiat is collapsing, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. I think it's decades away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. What first thing, I guess, before we get to that part, actually, is so this brings up the logical question of people. You get a lot of, okay, well, yeah, in with the neutral money that captures deflation, you guys are never going to spend. Like Bitcoiners are never going to spend money. And also I hope people realize this is why we say 0.1 Bitcoin or get 0.01 Bitcoin. It's a goal to hit and to get in the system. I mean, one thing is just to, like, once you have skin in the game, then you start paying attention. That's part of it. And then you start educating yourself. But also it's, it really is going to be a magical thing as Bitcoin starts eating everything, all the monetary premium in the world or all the assets in the world.
That's right.
That's why it's so powerful. And this reframing, like we just said, of everything crashing against Bitcoin, that's why people talk like that. So I would love you to just touch on just, will people spend? If you can always say, oh, it's going to be cheaper in the future. Terence, are you ever going to spend your Bitcoin at some point?
Yeah, well, I love when people bring this up because they're missing the whole point of money in the first place. Because a saver of any money, Bitcoin or not, a saver today is just a spender tomorrow. And when someone is saving money, what are they doing? Well, first of all, they already put the work into the economy. They had to work to get the money to save. So when I save, I am sitting on the sidelines. I'm sort of not in the penalty box, but I was trying to give you a hockey metaphor because I know you play hockey.
Trying to be
you're sitting on the bench. And so you're allowing the players who want to play right now, the people that need to buy socks, the people that need to buy the dresser behind you, they're going to get a better price because I'm not just buying it because I'm bored and don't have anything to do. I don't need to just buy a 10th pair of Air Jordans when, it's like I have a couple of pair. And so by me saving and allowing those people, they get a better price, right? Because what is a price is just information that says in a perfect market, here's the supply and demand. And it lets merchants and vendors know you need to lower your prices. Not enough people are buying them. Or it says, hey, you can now make more, which is a productive way. And it's also good for the environment. People aren't overproducing. So when you save, you let the spenders call the shots. Today, a saver calls the shot tomorrow. And by the way, where do people get money in the first place? And people need to also borrow money, or they need money for a business, or, hey, Terence, will you invest in this business? Will you help me with this? Where's that going to come from? That's because I'm saving, because I'm sitting on the sidelines. And when I sit on the sidelines and I get to think and plan and analyze and research, then when the coach says, hey, get off the bench and get on the ice, I'm ready to go because I've been saving. So when people say like Bitcoiners are just going to hoard and they're not going to spend, they clearly don't understand economics, because where does all the money come from? The people that need to spend, it comes from the savers. What are you buying if you're a spender? You're buying things from a business that had to save to get the money. Sorry, I get frustrated when people bring that up.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's just, again, it's why it's, hey, this is good. Like you said, so this is my next question. It leads right into this. I mean, this is going to be maybe decades of education. And just like we said, this is a psychological warfare that we are in. From how do you tell a frog or a fish he's wet if he's been in the water his whole life, right? And it's similar to the frog in the boiling pot analogy, where it's hard to tell if it's just slowly over time or it's all it's just relative to you. So these conversations have to be had, handling objections over and over and over again, and the education will wake people up. So in saying that, what do you think? I'm a big like 10 to 20 years guy. I believe, going back to Harry Dent, big demographic shift guy. I think the shift, and you brought this up earlier, is why I'm also thinking about this, is the younger generations, probably some Gen Xers and then millennials and Gen Z, will be the thing that really flips this iceberg over the next 10 to 20 years when you see this wealth transfer from the silent generation and boomer generation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And especially like, the Gen Zs, they can't afford, going back to real estate, they can't afford a house. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was like my dad's era. It's like the 1 year's income bought you an entire house, right? Like if so for 1 year, you
Yeah.
could just like not spend a single dollar on anything. If that was even possible, you bought a
Hmm.
house. Today we're at 7 to 8x. And that's
Jeez.
7 to 8 years. And that's just for the average. And so a Gen Z, and I know many Gen Zs who have become Bitcoiners who are just like, well, yeah, so I'm just going to save in Bitcoin. Anyone can access Bitcoin. I could buy 50 cents of Bitcoin. I could buy $1 of Bitcoin. And then they can rent. They have the freedom. It's peaceful. They can leave whatever they want. The landlord's going to take care of everything and pay the taxes and fix the HVAC system and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's going to be the one thing. And two, they're already digitally native.
Hmm.
The boomers that feel comfortable or even the older than boomers, I'd say like the silent generation, even,
Oh,
they don't want to take the risk. They're set.
right.
And, so when the house comes down to the Bitcoiner, maybe the Bitcoiner will stay and live in the house, but I don't think that they need to put more money into the house.
Hmm.
I think there's going to be a big shift in the bonds. Like bonds clearly do zero or flat, and in fact are really negative in true purchasing power. And that's where most of the world saves.
Yep.
The majority of all, I think there's $1 quadrillion in our system, right? That's 1,000 trillion for people who don't realize we're up to quadrillion now. So out of that 1,000 trillion, you're looking at, 4 to 500 trillion just in bonds that are basically making you 0% or even negative. So it's like, I see a lot of that moving in. When those come down to the Gen Zs or the whatever generations after that, when they get those, I see a lot of that going into Bitcoin. So I think like anything similar to, the internet and all technologies before that or protocols before that, it just takes time. And because we love Bitcoin so much, because we're paying attention and so excited and we're cheering on and rooting for every new company that comes in. And, Morgan Stanley just announced they're going to now get all their registered investment advisors on board, and they're going to encourage everybody to move 2 to 4% of their portfolios into Bitcoin. Like we cheer on all these little things, but we just have to zoom out, and it's happening, right? This is a protocol that has, no marketing company, no executives, no nothing. And we're at what, 2.5, I think yesterday we hit 2.5 trillion in market cap.
Hmm.
That's just insane to think about. So the younger generations are going to push the narrative far and wide. But I do believe that it's unfortunately or fortunately, it's Wall Street and the institutions that are going to drive adoption even faster, because meaning they're going to move more amounts of capital
Hmm.
because they're the ones that can see, they can do the math. And that's what's great about AI. Anyone can just go on AI and start asking questions about Bitcoin and should I invest in Bitcoin and show me the numbers and this and that. Hands down, every time, doesn't matter which AI model you use, it's all going to say Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, Bitcoin's the best.
I love it. In saying all that, because I agree with you, the thing that worries me, kind of coming back to even some in the beginning, and this is like, again, goes back to a little bit of the infighting of like the status Bitcoin number go up people, and then the cypherpunk ethos, and you're trying to marry these
Mm-hmm.
worlds together, right? And just knowing you and you who you are, I know you're someone who's, like we'll call it 50-50, like you're on the fence. So like you see both sides, and I'm that way as well. Like I believe we need to get the Trojan horse in the gates of government. I think, Bitcoin doesn't need governments or corporations or all these things, but they need Bitcoin. And my fear, and then in keeping the cypherpunk ethos, right? You want to keep these ideals, you want to keep the protocol, the way it is. Like we won't go down these roads, but on this episode. But my point is the psychological aspect. How do you keep people from adopting it, and we're going down this adoption road and not having people psychologically think, oh, this is just another asset, this is just another thing that Morgan Stanley has, or this is just another thing. It's like, oh, a new bond, like you said earlier, like, oh, it's a new stock, like this is great. It's a new thing where, as we know, this is a totally new operating system for society. It's a new money, it's a new protocol, everything. How do we, in your mind, marry those two things without people getting confused and just kind of, again, psychologically being like, oh, cool, government's got it, okay, good to go here, and just back to my life, we're good to go?
Yeah, well, first of all, we know that, Bitcoin is a separation of the state and money.
Mhm.
And what that means is that, Bitcoin is for everyone. Everyone can use it permissionlessly and at any time and at any point they want to. No one can stop them from using it. And that's great. And if you want to think about it as digital gold in that respect, fantastic. But if Bitcoin is for everyone, it means it's for every family, which means it's for that family's company. They're running a shoe shop, they're selling muffins, and it means it's for their retirement because they want to have money later. So that might lead into an IRA, that might lead into a 401k. Well, that comes with institutions.
Mhm.
That means it's for institutions. That means it's for cities. It means it's for states, and it means it's for nation states. So it really is for everyone. And so as you get larger and larger and larger, it is going to get financialized because, talking about Bitcoin or saving, for example, like in a perfect world, I don't want to spend my Bitcoin. I want a loan on my Bitcoin. I want to
Mhm.
collateralize my Bitcoin. Well, that's mostly going to happen with an institution, that can secure it with multi-signature key setups, collaborative security, and, proof of reserves. And I know that my Bitcoin is there and my Bitcoin is safe, but I hold one of the keys. I'm going to want to do that. But that's going to be done with Fidelity. That's going to be done with Morgan Stanley. That's going to be done with Jack Mallers' new company. I think that's where Cantor Fitzgerald's going. I think that's where Michael Saylor. I think Michael
Mhm.
Saylor's end game is to have that Bitcoin credit cards, Bitcoin loans, Bitcoin financialized services, Bitcoin, college loans, whatever. That's all going to be there. And that only happens once we institutionalize it. Now, what the great thing about Bitcoin is that Bitcoin doesn't know whether you're an entire nation state or whether you're BlackRock or whether you're a person. Just like a calculator, it's all the same. There are just
Mhm.
addresses. We reassign value from one address to another. And so, yes, you want to hold your own Bitcoin, but when you're financializing it, because now you're going to get a loan for your house or whatever, and it has to sit over here, as long as you can verify that, as long as you can see that it's there, that's fantastic because you have perfect collateral. So I think, the hardcore cypherpunks that said, "Oh, Bitcoin is a separation of, money and state, and screw the banks. I can operate entirely on my own. I don't need to trust anybody. I can run my own node." Absolutely. I'm that same way, and I agree, and everyone should have that for themselves. But just like you have different levels of your fiat with retirement, savings, checking, a home loan, stocks, bonds, you can do that with Bitcoin. And it's like you can have your hardcore Bitcoin, but you could also have a collaborative security model here. And you could have a thing over here because I have a Bitcoin mortgage here. And I'd rather pay, 6 to 8% a year, as high as that might sound for a fiat mortgage, rather than incur the 25% capital gains and sell it and knowing that it's going up. I mean, like right now, we're still over an 86% CAGR over the last 10 years. So counting even the downs with Bitcoin, 86% a year, it's going up. Why would I shave off a Bitcoin and miss out on that 86% up when I can just pay 6 to 8%, hell, 15%
Mhm.
over here? And
Yeah.
so the anarchist Bitcoiner that is okay with losing that 86% because they want to spend it on something, pay some medical bills, buy mom a house. Absolutely. That's fantastic. I would rather take whatever slight risk is over here and try to minimize that so that my Bitcoin can continue to grow. And because I can do that much more good for other people in the world and other businesses and philanthropy. I think about philanthropy a lot
Mhm.
because I think Bitcoiners are going to reach a point where they have everything they need, and most Bitcoiners don't want to get more
Yeah.
than they need. And now we start to have true charity and think like, how can I actually help people directly peer to peer rather than go through some, scam charity that takes 70% of the money and you don't even know if it goes to where it's supposed to go. As we saw,
True.
like with the Canadian truckers and stuff, like when us
Right.
Bitcoiners were able to help people directly.
True volunteerism and altruism. And yeah, I think you're right. I think the next cycle or two, we're going to start seeing much more of that because Bitcoiners obviously will be enough Bitcoiners will have increased their wealth and purchasing power to a point where you're going to see much more of that. Bitcoiners taking over businesses, buying lots of assets, legacy assets. It's going to be very interesting the next 5-10 years, just in that sense. So, great segue. I didn't plan this at all, but this is why some of our sponsors, Stampseed, which they have their new 12 word play, 24 word play. I got to shout them out. Foundation, the Passport Core, the Bitcoin Way guys help, so some of our amazing sponsors, Bitcoin only, open source, privacy centric, made in the USA, people, like that. I mean, we have to, that's why what you're talking about, Terence, is so important, because, the education with your book. So again, the links in the description for all these things, all those things I just mentioned. Terence's book will be in here. Educate yourself.
Stampseed is fantastic. Yeah, we had Foundation on our show just 2 days ago. They were great.
Yes. I mean, just centering yourself. You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with most, so if you're hanging around people like Terence, reading his book, getting on his spaces, you're hanging out with the Stampseed people and the Foundation people and Tony Yazbek and the Bitcoin Way, some of these people, holy cow. I mean, you were with people who literally have been through the ringer and back, hell and back, literally and figuratively. So you have to hang around the right people, because that, to your point, that's what helps us stave off, hey, we're getting it where the Trojan horse is inside the city. Anything can happen inside the city at this point. We got to be careful, but doing those things, self-custody, that is the revolution. Those things and helping with that, that's going to be the thing that really changes everything from the inside out, and defunds the legacy system. So I had to shout that out, because it was just,
no, I'm glad.
It was beautiful.
What you just said is important. And those sponsors, those are great sponsors, because the thing is, in the future, everyone will want your Bitcoin. It's the most valuable resource on earth, because it represents resources. And so everyone is going to want it, good or bad, they will want it. So you need to secure it.
Yeah, so true. Last thing I have for you. What is the, we were talking about, getting, loans, and debt in that world, in the fiat world, right? That's kind of the trade. That is the trade. It's been the trade of saving a hard asset, saving real money, and then take a loan against fiat depreciating currencies. And that's, again, as real estate guys, that's the game. And so people are starting to learn that and realize that, until this old system collapses. And that is the game. That's how you're defunding the system and collapsing that system. In saying all that, what do you look at, not a price prediction for this cycle or whatever, but like, what do you look at in terms of, like M2, has been going up and going vertical, and Bitcoin's lagging. So now we're starting to see this, hey, it's starting to catch it. But like, what do you look at in terms of the Bitcoin end game? And that could be 10 years from now or 100 years from now. Is it going to account for all those assets, all 1,000 trillion, all 1 quadrillion, or is it 1/2 of every trade? Like Jack Mallers says, it's going to be 500 trillion. That's the end game for it. So how do you look at Bitcoin's end game when you're kind of looking out across the horizon?
So the end game for Bitcoin is that it's money, and finally everyone adopts it as money and everyone accepts it as money. And so once we get there, by definition of money, it will literally be half of all the value in the world, because money is just the other half of any trade. You have all the goods and services on one side, money represents the other. And so it's as simple as that. So the end game is that whatever amount we have in the world, it will represent the other half. And so right now, with 1 quadrillion in the world, that would be, $500 trillion. Right now, we are at 2.5 trillion. So that shows you how early we are and how much we have to grow, because it will become half of everything. And that's because not only for the first time do we have money, but the first time we have money, true money, that can also be a currency. Like, we've had things close to money and we've had currencies that debase, but we haven't had a currency, meaning fiat, that is money. Clearly you can't save in fiat. And then the money we've had has been imperfect to use as a currency. That's why gold has essentially failed. It couldn't really be used as a currency once we had Morse code and the telegraph. And also, it just couldn't be custodied without trust. And then suddenly we were working on receipts. I forget what the figure is, but I think they think gold right now is rehypothecated about 200 to 1 in the paper markets. I mean, that's terrible. That dilutes it right there as is. Like that doesn't sound like a scarce asset to me, because most people don't own physical gold. They're trading with, gold ETFs and gold markets.
Yep.
Derivatives.
Yeah, well, again, that's why, just kind of putting a bow on all this, that's why we talked earlier about the get 0.00001 Bitcoin, get 0.1 Bitcoin, set these goals, stack, because everything's getting cheaper when you save in Bitcoin. And if you want to look at it in fiat terms, in a sense, what, 200 or 225x from here still to go. And that's what people don't see. They miss the forest from the trees and they run to penny stocks, altcoins, scams, all this BS. They spend thousands of hours trying to get into real estate. Unless you love it, like you said, it's just easier to go to work, provide value for people, spend time with your family, touch grass, and save in Bitcoin and defund the system, the corrupt system we're in. So
people think they missed it. They look at the price and they think they missed it. But no, we're just starting. Like on a risk adjusted return, it's still the best time ever right now. Right. Like I tell fiat people, I'm like, what's considered one of the best investors and best stocks out there? Well, Warren Buffett. Have you looked at the price of his stock? Like, I think it's 700 or 800,000. And why is that? Because like Bitcoin, he believes you shouldn't be splitting. He believes that invites traders. And it's like, well, look at Bitcoin.
Terence. Yeah. No, I was gonna say, think about that. I mean, like his is said the Class A shares are $700,000-800,000 a share. And that's in a, again, that's in the stock market. I mean, think about that. We have a perfectly finite asset with network effects and all these, I mean, so much layered on top of it and what it can do for humanity, society, the mining aspect. We didn't even talk about mining. I mean, how it can clean up the earth and things it's doing. I mean, it's like, it's so mind blowing. And so it's like, you have an example right there, a very small example that it can get to 700-800. One thing already has done that. And what does that do compared to what Bitcoin has been doing and will do in the future? I mean, it's just mind blowing. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. And that's why these talks are so important. It's hard for us to wrap our mind around. We've been doing it for 10,000 hours. So what, in saying that, what really quick, how much time went into your book? Like what spurred you to do that? And how much time went into writing that book?
So, in Hollywood, I wrote a Hollywood book about the hero's journey. In real estate, I wrote a real estate book, all about real estate investment strategies and whatnot. Now, as a Bitcoiner, I cringe at both of those things that I did. But my point is that I'm a writer first. Like, I'm not a Bitcoiner who said, oh, wow, I got to write about this. I'm a writer who discovered Bitcoin. And so as I was coming into Bitcoin, I said, I need to write a book, just like I did with real estate and just like I did with Hollywood. And the reason I did those was actually very selfish. I did them because I wanted to synthesize my own thoughts and I wanted to get better at what I thought I knew and find out the areas where I didn't, where my circle of competence was limited. And that's what I did with Bitcoin. There were areas in Bitcoin that I thought I knew, but I didn't quite. And when you write a book, you have to show up and broadcast to the world and you immortalize. This is in words everywhere, all over the world, in audio and written form and whatnot. So it's like, you better get it right. And so as you start writing what you know, and you're like, like getting into mining, and you're like, stop. I got to go down this deep hole, come back. And so that's what it was for me. I knew I always wanted 21 chapters, 21 minutes each. And I wanted to try to cover all of the main things. But
amazing.
I think a lot of writers will tell you writing is actually a very selfish thing. It really helps you more than anyone else. And so that's why. And if anyone else can read it, then that's great. And it also was a way for me to orange pill my parents. It sounds devious, but the way I orange pilled them is that when I wrote it, because they're both academics and they're both very good writers themselves, I said, hey, will you guys proofread my book? Just grammar, syntax, whatever, And like when my dad finished it first, I love it. My dad emailed me and he said, this is fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And, he had a whole Google document with his fixes, but he said, hey, I think I better buy some Bitcoin. And I loved it. It was like one of the best things I heard him say about, Bitcoin, because he had to read the whole thing carefully. And it's like, oh, wow, this makes sense.
Wow. Good on you. What a move.
So I got them to convert some of their bonds. My parents converted some of their bonds to Bitcoin. So I was like, wow, that's great.
Good for you. That's amazing. That's a great story. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, Terence?
On Twitter, X. Proof of Money. That's where I am. I put tons of educational videos out there. I think I got over 20 of them in my highlights tab. Unfortunately, that's the only platform I'm really on. And then my book they can buy anywhere they buy books. Yeah.
Beautiful. I will, I'll link to the book, obviously, link to your Twitter profile. So you're always doing spaces all the time so people can go in there. It's an awesome spot to learn. Just sit back, put it on, listen, learn from you and some of the smartest people in the world, really, and not just in the Bitcoin space, but some of the smartest people in the world that come into the space. It's truly a pleasure. Thank you for coming on once again, Terence. This is an absolute blast. Look forward to doing it again here in the future.
Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.